They left me stranded at the airport like forgotten luggage, but what I discovered afterward made them wish they'd never bought that ticket. I'm glad you're here with me today. Stay until the very end and comment which country you're watching from so I can see how far my story travels across the world. At 70 years old, I thought I understood betrayal. I thought I knew what it felt like to be disposable. But standing alone in Terminal C of Silverpine International Airport at 11 o'clock at night, watching my son's car disappear into the darkness without me, I realized I had been naive about the depths of human cruelty, especially when it comes from your own blood. My name is Dorothy Castellano, and for 7 decades I've called the coastal city of Meridian Bay my home. It's a beautiful place where the Atlantic Ocean crashes against rocky cliffs, where historic lighthouses dot the shoreline, and where I raised my only child, Marcus, after my husband Vincent died of a heart attack when Marcus was just 12 years old. I worked as a bookkeeper for 30 years at Harrington and Associates, a respected accounting firm in downtown Meridian Bay. The work was steady, honest, and it allowed me to provide Marcus with a good education, music lessons, summer camps, and eventually helped him through 4 years at Westmont University. Vincent had left us a modest life insurance policy and our family home, a 3-story Victorian on Sycamore Lane that had been in the Castellano family for 4 generations. That house wasn't just property. It was my history, my memories, my security. Marcus graduated with a degree in business management and went to work for Pemberton Logistics, a shipping and freight company with offices throughout the Northeast. He was smart, ambitious, and I was proud of him, even when his work took him to different cities for months at a time. He married a lovely woman named Claire Donovan when he was 28. Claire was a kindergarten teacher with warm hazel eyes and a gentle disposition. For 10 years, they seemed happy. They gave me 2 beautiful grandchildren, Lily who's now 14, and Thomas who's 12. Then 3 years ago, everything changed. Marcus started traveling more frequently to the company's headquarters in Ashford Creek, a city about 4 hours north of Meridian Bay. The trips became longer. His phone calls home became shorter. Claire started showing up at my house with red-rimmed eyes and forced smiles, insisting everything was fine even when it clearly wasn't. I suspected an affair, of course. What mother wouldn't? But Marcus was my son, and I wanted to believe in his integrity, in the values I'd tried to instill in him. So I said nothing, hoping whatever storm was brewing in their marriage would pass. It didn't pass. 2 years ago, Marcus filed for divorce. Claire was devastated, but she handled it with more grace than Marcus deserved. The divorce was bitter and expensive. Marcus fought her on every point: the house, the custody arrangement, the division of assets. He transformed from the son I knew into someone cold and calculating, someone who saw relationships as transactions and people as obstacles to what he wanted. And what he wanted, it turned out, was Sienna Blackwood. I first met Sienna 6 months before Marcus filed for divorce, though I didn't know who she was at the time. Marcus brought her to a family cookout at my house, introducing her as a colleague from the Ashford Creek office who was visiting Meridian Bay for a conference. She was 32 years old, nearly 15 years younger than Marcus, with sleek black hair that fell to her shoulders in perfect waves, sharp green eyes that seemed to calculate everything they observed, and a smile that never quite reached those eyes. She wore expensive clothes. I noticed that immediately. Her handbag was one of those designer brands that cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and her jewelry was understated but clearly expensive. Real gold, real diamonds, the kind of things that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. "Mrs. Castellano," she'd said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "Marcus has told me so much about you. Your home is absolutely charming." The word charming felt like an insult wrapped in politeness. My Victorian house was well maintained but old, filled with family heirlooms and memories rather than modern furniture and trendy decor. When Sienna said charming, I heard outdated and quaint in the subtext. But I smiled and welcomed her because that's what you do when your son brings a colleague to a family gathering. Claire was there too, trying so hard to be the perfect wife, laughing at Marcus's jokes and serving him food with the desperate energy of someone who knew she was losing something but couldn't quite identify what. I watched Sienna watch Claire that afternoon. There was something predatory in her gaze, something triumphant. And I watched Marcus watch Sienna with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, with his first crush, eager, hungry, and completely devoid of the guilt he should have been feeling. 6 months later, Claire's world fell apart. 6 months after that, Marcus and Sienna moved in together in a sleek modern townhouse in Ashford Creek, and my relationship with my son began its slow disintegration. Sienna made it clear from the beginning that she didn't appreciate my presence in Marcus's life. Phone calls that used to happen weekly became monthly, then quarterly. Invitations to visit were met with excuses about busy work schedules and prior commitments. When I did manage to see Marcus, Sienna was always there, inserting herself into every conversation, steering discussions away from topics she deemed unimportant, which included most things about my life, Claire's well-being, and especially my grandchildren. Marcus needs to focus on his future, not dwell on the past, she told me once when I mentioned that Lily had made the honor roll. Claire's household is her responsibility, not ours. Our. She said ours, as if she had any claim to my son beyond her ability to manipulate him. But I bit my tongue. I swallowed my anger and my hurt because Marcus seemed happy, or at least he seemed to think he was happy, and I didn't want to be the overbearing mother who drove her son away completely. That brings me to 3 weeks ago, when everything came crashing down in the worst way possible. The journey begins. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning. I was in my kitchen making tea and planning my grocery list when my phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen, and my heart did that little leap it always did when I heard from him, no matter how infrequently that happened anymore. "Mom," he said, and his voice had that warm, familiar tone I remembered from before Sienna. "How are you doing?" "I'm well, sweetheart. It's so good to hear your voice. How are things in Ashford Creek?" "Busy but good. Listen, I'm calling because Sienna and I are planning a trip to Clearwater Cove. You know that resort community down in the southern coast?" I did know it. Clearwater Cove was one of those exclusive resort towns that catered to wealthy tourists, with pristine beaches, luxury hotels, and restaurants where a single meal cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. "That sounds lovely," I said carefully, wondering why he was telling me this. "We'd like you to come with us." I nearly dropped my teacup. "What?" "We want you to join us for a week. Clearwater Cove is beautiful this time of year, and Sienna thought it would be nice to spend some quality time together. Sort of a family bonding experience." Family bonding. With Sienna. The woman who had systematically removed me from my son's life for the past 2 years. "I don't know, Marcus." "That's very generous, but dash. Mom, please. I know things have been strained between us. I know I haven't been the most attentive son lately. This is my way of trying to fix that. Let me do this for you. Let me give you a vacation. You've worked hard your whole life. You deserve to relax on a beach and enjoy yourself." The plea in his voice broke down my defenses. This was my son, my only child, asking to spend time with me. How could I say no? When would we leave? "Next Friday." I know it's short notice, but we managed to get a great deal on a beachfront rental property. 3 bedrooms, right on the ocean. It'll be perfect. We talked for another 20 minutes about the details. The trip would be from Friday through the following Friday, 8 days total. Marcus would pick me up at my house on Friday morning, we drive to Meridian Bay Regional Airport, and catch a 3-hour flight to Clearwater Cove. "Pack light," Marcus advised. "We'll have laundry facilities at the rental, and you won't need much besides beach clothes and casual outfits. Oh, and bring your medications if you take any regular prescriptions. We want to make sure you're comfortable." "I don't take any regular medications," I told him. "My doctor says I'm healthy as a horse for 70. "That's great, Mom. That's really great. So I'll see you Friday morning, around 7? We need to be at the airport by 9 for our 11:15 flight." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, staring at my phone. Something felt off about the invitation, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly. Sienna wanting to spend a week with me? Sienna suggesting family bonding? It seemed out of character. But Marcus had sounded genuinely warm, genuinely interested in reconnecting. Maybe Sienna was making an effort. Maybe she realized that cutting me out of Marcus's life was hurting him. Maybe I was being overly suspicious because I'd never liked her. I called Claire that evening. "Dorothy," she answered, and I could hear the smile in her voice. Claire had continued to treat me like family even after the divorce, bringing the children to visit me regularly and calling to check on me. She was a better daughter to me than Marcus had been a son lately. "Claire, dear. I wanted to let you know I'll be away next week. Marcus invited me on a vacation to Clearwater Cove." There was a pause. "Marcus invited you on vacation?" "I know," I was surprised too. "He and Sienna want to spend some quality time together. A week at the beach." Another pause, longer this time. "Dorothy, I don't want to overstep, but that seems unusual. Has Marcus been acting differently lately? Calling more often? Asking about your health or your house?" "Not really." "Why do you ask?" "It's probably nothing. Marcus has been asking the kids questions about you. About whether you forget things, whether you seem confused when they visit. Lily mentioned it to me last week, and it struck me as odd." A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "What kind of questions?" "Things like whether you remember their names right away, whether you ever seem lost in your own house, whether you repeat yourself in conversations. Lily thought it was weird because you've always been sharp as a tack. She was actually worried that Marcus knew something about your health that we didn't." "I'm perfectly healthy. My doctor confirmed it at my last checkup 3 months ago." "I'm sure you are." "Like I said, it's probably nothing. Maybe he's just worried about you getting older and wants to make sure you're okay. Just be careful, Dorothy. I know he's your son, but Marcus has changed. The man I divorced isn't the man I married, and I don't think Sienna has been a good influence on him." We talked for a few more minutes, and after I hung up, that cold feeling in my stomach had spread to my chest. Why would Marcus be asking the children if I seemed confused or forgetful? Why would he be gathering information about my mental state? I pushed the thoughts away. I was being paranoid. Claire was understandably bitter about the divorce, and maybe that was coloring her perception of Marcus's intentions. He was my son. Whatever his flaws, whatever mistakes he'd made in his marriage, he wouldn't hurt his own mother. Would he? Friday morning. The morning of our departure arrived with clear skies and mild temperatures. I'd packed a small suitcase with beach clothes, casual outfits, and my favorite mystery novels. I'd watered my plants, set my mail on hold at the post office, and arranged for my neighbor, Helen Pritchard, to keep an eye on the house. Marcus arrived at 6:50 in a luxury SUV I didn't recognize. It was sleek, black, and looked expensive. Sienna sat in the passenger seat, her face obscured by large designer sunglasses despite the early hour. "Mom," Marcus said, getting out to help with my suitcase. He looked good, tanned, fit, wearing expensive casual clothes that probably cost more than my entire vacation wardrobe. He kissed my cheek, and for just a moment, he was my little boy again, the child who used to run to me with skinned knees and bad dreams. "Good morning, sweetheart. Thank you again for inviting me." "Of course. We're going to have a great week." He loaded my suitcase into the back. "You remember Sienna?" I walked around to the passenger side. Sienna lowered her window but didn't remove her sunglasses. "Mrs. Castellano. So glad you could join us." Her tone was perfectly polite and completely devoid of warmth. But I smiled and said, "Thank you for including me, Sienna. I'm looking forward to spending time together." She made a non-committal sound and raised her window again. I climbed into the back seat, and we headed toward Meridian Bay Regional Airport. The drive took about 30 minutes through morning traffic. Marcus and Sienna talked between themselves about work matters, shipping contracts, client meetings, someone named Philip who was apparently causing problems in the Ashford Creek office. I sat in the back, watching the familiar streets of my city pass by, and tried to ignore the growing sense of unease in my chest. We arrived at the airport at 8:15, giving us plenty of time for our 11:15 flight. Marcus pulled into the departures area, and for the first time since picking me up, he turned to look at me directly. "Mom, Sienna and I need to grab coffee before we check in. The airport coffee is terrible, so we're going to hit that cafe across the street. Why don't you go ahead and get in line at the ticket counter? Our confirmation number is on my phone, I'll text it to you. We'll meet you at security in about 20 minutes. Oh. Okay, I suppose that's fine. Should I take my suitcase? Actually, leave it in the car for now. Once we check in, I'll come back for all the luggage at once. It'll be easier than all of us juggling bags." It made sense, in a way. But something about it felt wrong. Why would they get coffee across the street when there were multiple cafes inside the airport? "Marcus, I can just wait with you. Mom, please. The check-in line is going to get long, and I don't want us to end up rushed. Just head in, get in line, and we'll see you in a few minutes. Okay?" There was an edge to his voice, just a hint of impatience that made me nod and reach for my purse. All right. 20 minutes at security. I got out of the SUV and watched as Marcus pulled away from the curb, heading toward the parking area exit. That was odd too. If they were going to a cafe across the street, why not just leave the car at the curb with flashers on? Why drive away completely? "Stop it, Dorothy," I told myself firmly. "You're being paranoid. They're getting coffee, they're parking the car properly, and they'll meet you inside. Everything is fine." I walked into the terminal building, pulling my purse higher on my shoulder. Meridian Bay Regional was a modest-sized airport, serving mostly domestic flights and a few international routes to Canada and the Caribbean. Terminal C was the main domestic terminal, with about 20 gates and the usual collection of restaurants, shops, and service counters. The departures board showed our flight, Coastal Airlines Flight 847 to Clearwater Cove, departing at 11:15 from Gate C7. On time. Everything normal. I approached the Coastal Airlines ticket counter and joined the line, which was already about 15 people deep. As I waited, I pulled out my phone to check for Marcus's text with the confirmation number. Nothing yet. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. The line moved slowly forward as passengers checked bags and received boarding passes. Still no text from Marcus. At the 15-minute mark, I tried calling him. The phone rang 5 times and went to voicemail. "Marcus, honey, I'm at the ticket counter but I haven't received the confirmation number yet. Call me back when you get this." I waited another 5 minutes, then tried again. Voicemail again. I called Sienna's number, which Marcus had given me years ago for emergencies. It rang once, then disconnected. When I tried again, it went straight to voicemail. The cold feeling in my stomach was turning to ice. I stepped out of line and walked toward the terminal windows that overlooked the parking area and departures curb. Marcus's black SUV was nowhere to be seen. Maybe they were still at the cafe. Maybe Marcus's phone had died. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation for why I was standing alone in an airport terminal without confirmation numbers, without luggage, without any way to reach my son. I went back to the line, now anxious enough that my hands were shaking. By the time I reached the counter, 35 minutes had passed since Marcus and Sienna had dropped me off. "Good morning," the agent said with a professional smile. She was a young woman with her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing the blue and white Coastal Airlines uniform. Her name tag read Jennifer. "Good morning. I need to check in for Flight 847 to Clearwater Cove, but I'm having trouble reaching my son who has our confirmation number." "No problem. I can look it up by name." "What name is the reservation under?" "I believe it's under Marcus Castellano. Or possibly Dorothy Castellano." Jennifer typed efficiently, her eyes scanning her computer screen. Then her expression shifted slightly, a small furrow appearing between her eyebrows. "I'm showing a reservation for Marcus Castellano and Sienna Blackwood on Flight 847. 2 passengers, 2 seats. But I don't see a Dorothy Castellano on this reservation." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. That can't be right. My son invited me on this trip. He told me we were all going to Clearwater Cove together. Let me check if there's a separate reservation. More typing. No, I'm not showing any other bookings under Castellano or Dorothy for any of today's flights to Clearwater Cove. Could the booking be under Sienna Blackwood's name? Let me look. A pause. No, ma'am. The only reservation under Blackwood is the one with Marcus Castellano. 2 passengers only. I stood there, my mind struggling to process what I was hearing. There must be a mistake. I'm sorry, ma'am. Could your son have made the reservation through a different airline? Or possibly scheduled you on a different day? No, he specifically said we were all flying out this morning on the 11:15 flight. Jennifer's expression became more sympathetic. Would you like to purchase a ticket for today's flight? We do have a few seats available. How much would that cost? For a one-way ticket to Clearwater Cove departing today, same-day booking, that would be $780. $780. I had about $3,000 in my checking account, savings that I'd carefully built up over years of modest living. Spending nearly a quarter of that on a last-minute flight seemed insane, especially when Marcus had invited me and should have already purchased my ticket. Let me try to reach my son again first, I said, stepping away from the counter with mumbled apologies to the people waiting behind me. I tried Marcus's phone again. Voicemail. Sienna's phone. Disconnected. I stood in the middle of Terminal C, watching other travelers rush past me with their rolling suitcases and excited children, and I felt completely, utterly lost. My phone rang, and I nearly dropped it in my haste to answer. Marcus? Mrs. Castellano? This is Jennifer from the Coastal Airlines counter. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I forgot to mention, the flight boards in about an hour, at 10:15. If you're planning to purchase a ticket, you'll need to do so in the next 20 minutes to have time for security screening. Thank you, Jennifer. I'll figure something out. But what was there to figure out? Either Marcus had made a mistake and forgotten to book my ticket, which seemed impossible given how specific he'd been about all the travel details, or he had deliberately told me we were all going when he'd only booked tickets for himself and Sienna. But why would he do that? Why bring me to the airport at all if he never intended for me to board the flight? I tried calling him again. And again. Each time, voicemail. At 9:40, with 35 minutes until the flight began boarding, I made a decision. I would buy the ticket. I would get on that plane, and when I reached Clearwater Cove, would get answers about what was happening. Maybe Marcus's phone really had died. Maybe there had been a genuine mix-up with the reservation. Maybe once we were all together at the rental property, this would all make sense. I returned to the ticket counter, where Jennifer was helping another passenger. Excuse me, Jennifer? I'd like to purchase that ticket after all. She looked up with sympathy in her eyes. Of course, Mrs. Castellano. Let me just finish here and I'll help you. But before she could complete the transaction she was working on, I felt my phone buzz with a text message. Finally. I looked at the screen. It was from Marcus. Mom, I'm so sorry. Emergency at work. Sienna and I had to return to Ashford Creek immediately. I tried to call but couldn't get through. Enjoy your vacation, the rental is already paid for. Confirmation details coming separately. Love you. I read the message 3 times, each time feeling more confused and hurt. They had left. Without explanation. Without saying goodbye. Without my luggage, which was still in Marcus's SUV. They had dropped me at an airport for a trip I wasn't actually booked on, then driven away to deal with some unspecified work emergency. Ma'am? Jennifer was looking at me with concern. Are you all right? Would you still like to purchase the ticket? I stopped, unsure what to say. My son sent a message. He and his girlfriend had to leave. Some kind of work emergency. Oh no. I'm so sorry. What about your vacation? He says the rental is still available. He's sending confirmation details. Well, that's something at least. You could still go and enjoy the beach on your own. Except I didn't have my suitcase. I didn't have my beach clothes or my books or anything except my purse with my wallet, my phone, and my house keys. My luggage is with him, I said quietly. Jennifer's sympathy deepened into something like pity. Oh, Mrs. Castellano. We stood there for a moment, and I felt the full weight of what had happened settling over me like a heavy blanket. My son had brought me to an airport, dropped me at the curb like unwanted baggage, and driven away without explanation. I need to get home, I said finally. I'm sorry to have taken up your time. Don't apologize. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Is there someone you can call for a ride? I thought about Helen, my neighbor. But Helen was 75 and didn't drive distances anymore. Claire was 40 minutes away and teaching class. Most of my other friends were my age or older, dealing with their own limitations. I'll call a taxi. Thank you for your help, Jennifer. Of course. I hope everything works out for you. I walked away from the counter, my phone clutched in my hand, and found a quiet corner near gate C-12 where I could sit and think. The departures board above me showed Marcus and Sienna's flight. Boarding had begun at gate C-7. They were here. Somewhere in this airport, in this very terminal, my son and his girlfriend were boarding a plane to Clearwater Cove while I sat alone with no luggage, no ticket, and no explanation that made any sense. I pulled up a taxi service app on my phone and requested a ride back to Meridian Bay. 45 minutes wait time, the app informed me. High demand this morning. So I sat. And I waited. And I watched their flight information on the departures board until it changed to departed at 11:20, 5 minutes after its scheduled departure time. They were gone. Flying off to their vacation without me. The taxi arrived at 10 past noon. By the time I got home to my empty house on Sycamore Lane, it was almost 1 o'clock. The driver charged me $85 for the 40-minute ride, and I tipped him $20 because he'd listened patiently to my story and told me his own mother had been treated poorly by family and it made him angry to see it happen to someone else. I walked into my house, locked the door behind me, and finally allowed myself to do what I'd been holding back for hours. I cried. I cried for the son I'd raised who had become someone I no longer recognized. I cried for the cruel absurdity of being abandoned at an airport like forgotten luggage. I cried for the humiliation of standing at a ticket counter explaining to a stranger that my own family had left without me. But most of all, I cried because somewhere deep in my chest, beneath the hurt and confusion, I felt something else beginning to stir. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger that burns bright and fades quickly. This was something colder, something that settled into my bones and made me think clearly instead of emotionally. Marcus hadn't forgotten to book my ticket. That text message about a work emergency had come 45 minutes after he'd dropped me off, plenty of time to have returned to the airport to explain in person if there had really been an emergency. No, this had been deliberate. But why? What possible reason could my son have for bringing me to an airport and abandoning me there? Claire's words from our phone conversation echoed in my mind. Marcus has been asking the kids questions about you. About whether you forget things, whether you seem confused when they visit. And then I remembered something else Marcus had said during that first phone call inviting me on this trip. Bring your medications if you take any regular prescriptions. We want to make sure you're comfortable. When I'd told him I didn't take any regular medications, he'd responded with, "That's great, Mom. That's really great." But his tone had been off. Not pleased exactly. Almost disappointed. I sat up straighter on my couch, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. Why would Marcus be disappointed that I was healthy? Why would he be asking my grandchildren if I seemed confused or forgetful? Unless he wanted me to appear unhealthy. Unless he needed people to think I was declining mentally. But again, why? I looked around my living room, at the Victorian house that had been in my family for 4 generations. The house that would one day pass to Marcus as my only heir. The house that sat on a double lot in a neighborhood that had been quietly gentrifying for the past decade, where property values had tripled in the last 5 years alone. My house. My property. My inheritance. The cold anger in my chest crystallized into something sharp and clear. I stood up, walked to my kitchen, and made myself a cup of tea with hands that were no longer shaking. Then I sat down at my small kitchen table and began making a list of everything strange that had happened in the past 3 months. It was time to figure out exactly what my son and his mistress were planning. And more importantly, it was time to make sure whatever they were planning failed spectacularly. Because they had made a crucial mistake when they left me at that airport. They'd underestimated me. They'd assumed I would be confused, hurt, and passive. They were wrong. I woke up Saturday morning with gritty eyes and a pounding headache from crying myself to sleep. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom curtains, and for just a moment, I forgot what had happened. Then reality came crashing back: the airport, the abandoned ticket, Marcus's text message about a work emergency that made no sense. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. No new messages from Marcus. No apology, no explanation, nothing. Just that single text from yesterday: emergency at work. Enjoy your vacation. Enjoy my vacation. Without luggage, without a ticket, without any real explanation for why they'd left me stranded like forgotten baggage. I pushed myself out of bed, my joints protesting. 70 years old means your body keeps score of every slight, every stress, every sleepless night. I shuffled to my bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. My gray hair was a mess, my brown eyes were bloodshot, and I looked every one of my 7 decades plus a few extra years for good measure. Pull yourself together, Dorothy, I told my reflection. Feeling sorry for yourself won't solve anything. I showered, dressed in comfortable clothes, and went downstairs to make coffee. My kitchen had always been my thinking place. Vincent and I used to sit at this same table every morning, planning our days, sharing our dreams, solving the small problems that make up a life together. After he died, I'd continue the tradition alone, working through difficulties over coffee and the morning newspaper. This problem was going to require more than coffee. I pulled out a yellow legal pad from my kitchen drawer and wrote, "What is happening?" across the top in capital letters. Then I began listing everything strange or suspicious from the past few months. 3 months ago. Marcus asked me if I'd updated my will recently. He seemed very interested in whether I'd appointed anyone as power of attorney. He mentioned putting affairs in order multiple times during a single phone conversation. 2 months ago. Marcus asked Claire, according to her, to have the children observe whether I seemed confused or forgetful. He suggested I might want to consider simpler living arrangements instead of maintaining the family house. Sienna joined a phone call and mentioned that older people often don't realize when they're declining. 1 month ago. Marcus asked if I'd ever considered selling the house on Sycamore Lane. He said he knew a real estate agent who could get me top dollar. He emphasized how much work the house must be for me at my age. 3 weeks ago. The vacation invitation came completely out of the blue. Marcus was unusually warm and interested in reconnecting. He specifically asked about my medications and seemed disappointed when I said I was healthy. Yesterday. Dropped at airport with no ticket booked. Left without explanation or apology. Fake work emergency excuse via text after they'd already abandoned me. I stared at the list, and the pattern became impossible to ignore. This wasn't random. This was methodical. Marcus had been building towards something for months, and that airport abandonment was part of a larger plan. But what plan? What could possibly be gained by humiliating me at an airport? I picked up my phone and called Claire. She answered on the second ring. Dorothy? Are you all right? I thought you were supposed to be in Clearwater Cove. Claire, dear, do you have time to talk? Something happened yesterday, and I need to figure out what's going on. Of course. The kids are at their dad's this weekend anyway. Do you want me to come over? Would you mind? I'd really appreciate it. I'll be there in 40 minutes. While I waited for Claire, I made more coffee and continued my list. I wrote down everything I could remember about my assets. Property. Victorian house on Sycamore Lane, fully paid off, inherited from my parents. Current estimated value, $850,000 based on recent neighborhood sales. Financial. Checking account, approximately $3,000. Savings account, approximately $47,000. Retirement account from Harrington and Associates, approximately $180,000. Life insurance policy, $100,000, Marcus is the beneficiary. Legal documents. Will dated 5 years ago, leaves everything to Marcus. No power of attorney appointed. No living will or healthcare directive. Total assets, approximately $1.18 million. Not wealthy by any means, but substantial enough to make me worth targeting if someone was inclined toward that kind of cruelty. The doorbell rang at exactly 10:30. Claire stood on my porch holding a bakery box and wearing concern on her kind face. "I brought croissants from Riverside Bakery," she said, hugging me carefully. "You sounded upset on the phone." I led her into the kitchen and poured her coffee while she arranged the croissants on a plate. Then I told her everything: the vacation invitation, the airport abandonment, Marcus's strange behavior over the past months, my growing suspicion that something sinister was happening. Claire listened without interrupting, her hazel eyes growing wider and more troubled as the story unfolded. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and let out a long breath. "Dorothy, I think Marcus is trying to have you declared mentally incompetent." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. "What?" "Think about it. He's been building a case that you're declining, asking the kids to watch for signs of confusion, suggesting you can't handle the house anymore, emphasizing your age. And yesterday's airport incident? That could be used as evidence that you're confused and can't manage travel arrangements." But I didn't make any mistake with the travel arrangements. He deliberately didn't book me a ticket. You know that, and I know that. But if Marcus tells people that you insisted you were going on a trip, showed up at the airport confused and without a ticket, unable to remember that he tried to tell you the plans had changed, well, to someone who doesn't know the truth, that could sound like the behavior of someone experiencing cognitive decline. I felt sick. He's creating a narrative. Yes. And if he can get you declared incompetent, he can petition for guardianship. That would give him control over your finances, your property, your healthcare decisions, everything. But I'm perfectly healthy. My doctor can confirm that. When was your last cognitive assessment? I thought about it. I've never had one. Dr. Morrison gives me a general physical every year, checks my blood pressure and cholesterol, asks if I'm having any problems. But we've never done specific cognitive testing. Marcus could argue that the lack of testing is suspicious, that you've been avoiding it because you know you'd fail. He could bring in his own expert who would testify that your behavior indicates decline. And Dorothy, I'm sorry to say this, but judges often err on the side of caution with elderly people. If there's any doubt about your capacity, they might appoint a guardian for your own protection. I gripped my coffee mug so tightly my knuckles went white. This is about the house, isn't it? He wants to sell it. The house, your savings, your retirement fund, all of it. If he gains guardianship, he can make financial decisions on your behalf. He could sell the house and claim he's moving you into more appropriate senior living. He could access your accounts for your care. And legally, there would be very little you could do about it. That's not possible. That can't be legal. It is legal, and it happens more often than you'd think. It's called guardianship abuse, and it's a nightmare to fight once it's in place. The system is designed to protect vulnerable elderly people, but sometimes it's exploited by family members who are more interested in assets than in actual care. I stood up and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at my garden where roses bloomed along the fence line. My mother had planted those roses 50 years ago. This house held 4 generations of Castellano family history. "I won't let him take it," I said quietly. "I won't let him take my home, my independence, my life." "Then we need to be strategic," Claire said. "We need to document your competence, gather evidence of Marcus's manipulation, and potentially get legal protection in place before he can make his move." I turned back to face her. What kind of legal protection? For starters, you need to get a comprehensive cognitive assessment from a reputable doctor as soon as possible. Create a documented baseline of your mental capacity. Then we need to look at your legal documents, updating your will, possibly creating a living trust, appointing power of attorney to someone you trust who isn't Marcus. Would you do it? I asked. Would you be my power of attorney? Claire's eyes filled with tears. Dorothy, I would be honored. But we should also talk to a lawyer about the best way to protect you. This is my ex-husband we're dealing with, and he has resources and connections that we need to take seriously. We spent the next hour planning. Claire knew a lawyer named Patricia Vance who specialized in elder law and estate planning. She also knew a geriatric psychiatrist, Dr. Raymond Shen, who could perform a comprehensive cognitive assessment. We decided to make appointments with both professionals first thing Monday morning. What about this weekend? I asked. Should I confront Marcus about yesterday? No, Claire said firmly. Don't let him know that you're onto him. Act confused if he contacts you. Play into his narrative for now. Let him think his plan is working. Meanwhile, we build our case. That feels dishonest. Dorothy, he abandoned you at an airport as part of a scheme to steal your home and your independence. I think a little strategic deception is justified. She had a point. Sunday, the email. Sunday morning, I was drinking coffee and pretending to read the newspaper when my phone chimed with an email notification. The sender was Marcus. My hand trembled as I opened it. Subject, Mom's travel confusion, concerned. Dear Mom. I wanted to follow up about what happened Friday. I'm very concerned about the confusion you experienced at the airport. As we discussed multiple times before the trip, Sienna and I had to cancel our vacation due to my work emergency. I called you Thursday night to let you know we weren't going, but you insisted you didn't remember our conversation and showed up at the airport anyway. I'm worried this might be a sign of some memory issues that we should address. I know aging is difficult, and there's no shame in needing help. I've made an appointment for you with Dr. Gerald Whitmore at Meridian Bay Neurological Center for this Tuesday at 2 p.m. He's a specialist in age-related cognitive decline, and I think it would be good for you to have a thorough evaluation. Please don't be upset with me for being concerned. I'm your son, and I love you. I just want to make sure you're getting the care you need. Love, Marcus. I read the email 3 times, my anger growing with each read. The audacity of it. The calculated manipulation of every word. There had been no phone call Thursday night. There had been no conversation about canceling the trip. He was creating a false narrative and documenting it in writing, building his case that I was confused and forgetful. And Dr. Gerald Whitmore, I'd never heard of him. I pulled out my laptop and searched for Dr. Gerald Whitmore Meridian Bay Neurological Center. The results made my blood run cold. Dr. Whitmore specialized in dementia and Alzheimer's disease. His practice focused almost exclusively on patients with severe cognitive impairment. His website featured testimonials from family members who had finally gotten the diagnosis that explained their loved one's behavior. This wasn't a routine evaluation. This was Marcus trying to get a specific diagnosis from a doctor who primarily saw patients who were already significantly impaired. I forwarded the email to Claire with a message, look at this. He's accelerating his timeline. She called me within 5 minutes. Don't go to that appointment, she said immediately. This Dr. Whitmore isn't an objective evaluator. His practice is built on diagnosing dementia. Marcus is doctor shopping, looking for someone who will give him the diagnosis he wants. Should I respond to the email? Yes, but carefully. Remember, anything you write could be used as evidence. Be polite but vague. Don't directly contradict his version of events. That could be framed as you being defensive because you know you're declining. Just be non-committal. With Claire's help, I crafted a response. Dear Marcus. Thank you for your concern. I appreciate you thinking of me. I have my regular doctor's appointment with Dr. Morrison next month, and I'll discuss any health concerns with her at that time. I hope you and Sienna enjoyed your time in Clearwater Cove despite the work issues. Love, Mom. Short, polite, non-confrontational. And most importantly, it established that I had my own doctor whom I trusted. Good, Claire said when I read it to her. Now, let's talk about tomorrow. I've made some calls. Patricia Vance can see you at 9 a.m. Dr. Chen can fit you in at 2 p.m. for a preliminary evaluation, with a full cognitive assessment scheduled for later this week. We're going to build documentation of your competence that will be impossible for Marcus to dispute. Claire, why are you helping me like this? Marcus is your ex-husband, the father of your children. This must be difficult for you. She was quiet for a moment. Dorothy, do you remember when Marcus and I were going through the divorce? When he was fighting me on custody and trying to reduce child support to almost nothing? Of course I remember. It was awful. You came to court with me. You testified about what kind of father Marcus had been, about how involved you'd seen me being with the children. You took my side against your own son because it was the right thing to do. The children needed their mother. He was being cruel. Yes, he was. And you stood up for what was right even though it cost you your relationship with Marcus for months afterward. Now it's my turn to stand up for what's right. Marcus has become someone I don't recognize, someone I certainly don't respect. And I won't stand by while he tries to destroy you. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you, Claire. Thank you for raising me to be part of your family even after I stopped being your daughter-in-law by law. Now let's make sure Marcus regrets the day he decided to underestimate both of us. Monday morning, the lawyer. Patricia Vance's office was located in a renovated historic building in downtown Meridian Bay, 3 blocks from the courthouse. The building had character, exposed brick walls, high ceilings, and large windows that let in abundant natural light. Patricia herself was a woman in her late 50s with steel gray hair cut in a sharp bob, intelligent blue eyes behind stylish glasses, and an air of competence that immediately put me at ease. Claire had come with me for moral support, and we sat in Patricia's comfortable office while I explained the situation, Marcus's behavior over the past months, the airport abandonment, the email trying to force me into an appointment with a dementia specialist, my suspicion that he was building a case for guardianship so he could control my assets. Patricia took notes on a yellow legal pad, asking occasional clarifying questions. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me seriously. Mrs. Castellano, I'm going to be direct with you. Based on what you've described, I believe your son is engaged in a targeted campaign to have you declared incompetent so he can assume guardianship and control of your estate. This is not uncommon, unfortunately. I see several cases like this every year. Can he actually succeed? I asked. If you don't take proactive steps to protect yourself? Yes, he absolutely could succeed. The guardianship system is designed to protect vulnerable adults, but it can be exploited. Your son is creating a narrative of decline, asking people to observe you for signs of confusion, documenting incidents that supposedly demonstrate poor judgment, trying to get you in front of a doctor who specializes in dementia diagnoses. If he files a guardianship petition, he'll present all of this as evidence that you need protection from your own poor decision-making. But I'm not declining. I'm healthy and mentally sharp. I can see that, and I believe you. But in a guardianship hearing, the burden of proof is relatively low. Your son doesn't have to prove you have dementia or severe cognitive impairment. He just has to demonstrate that you need assistance with decision-making. That's a much lower bar. And judges, trying to err on the side of protecting elderly individuals, often grant guardianship even when the evidence is thin. Claire leaned forward. So what can Dorothy do to protect herself? Patricia pulled out a fresh legal pad and began writing. Several things, and we need to do them quickly. First, we need to establish documented evidence of your cognitive capacity. You said you have an appointment with Dr. Chen this afternoon? Yes, for a preliminary evaluation. Good. Make sure he does a complete mini-mental state examination and any other standard cognitive assessments. We want multiple, objective measures of your mental capacity from a reputable, independent doctor. Not someone your son has selected. Done, I said. Second, we need to update your estate planning documents immediately. Right now, your will names Marcus as your sole beneficiary, correct? Yes, he's my only child. That's fine, you can still leave him your estate. But we need to add provisions that will make it much harder for him to gain control while you're still alive. I'm going to draft several documents for you. 1. A new durable power of attorney naming someone other than Marcus as your agent. Claire, are you willing to serve in this role? Absolutely, Claire said. 2. A healthcare directive specifying your wishes for medical care and naming a healthcare agent, again, not Marcus. 3. A revocable living trust that will hold your major assets, particularly your house. As trustee of your own trust, you maintain complete control. But if you were to become incapacitated, a successor trustee whom you've named, not Marcus, would manage those assets according to your instructions. 4. A statement of capacity. This is a document signed by you and witnessed by multiple people, declaring that you are of sound mind, that you're making these legal changes voluntarily, and that you have not been coerced or manipulated. I tried to absorb all of this information. How long will this take? I can have initial drafts ready by Wednesday. We'll review everything together, make any necessary changes, and then execute the documents with proper witnesses and notarization. The key is to get this done before Marcus files any guardianship petition. Do you think he'll file soon? Patricia's expression was grim. The fact that he sent you that email Sunday morning, trying to get you to a dementia specialist by Tuesday, suggests he's moving quickly. He probably wants to gather enough medical evidence to file a petition within the next few weeks. Maybe sooner. What happens if he files before we get all these documents in place? Then we fight it in court. We present your cognitive evaluations, we challenge his evidence, we expose his financial motivations. It would be harder, more expensive, and more stressful for you, but it's not impossible. However, I strongly prefer the proactive approach. If all these legal protections are already in place when he files, his petition becomes much weaker. He can't claim you need a guardian to make financial and healthcare decisions when you've already made those decisions competently and appointed agents you trust. How much is all of this going to cost? I asked, thinking of my modest savings. My retainer for estate planning is $2,500. That covers drafting all the documents we discussed, plus 2 rounds of revisions and the execution meeting. If Marcus does file a guardianship petition and we have to go to court, that's separate. Contested guardianship cases can run anywhere from $10,000 to $30,000 depending on complexity. I felt sick. I couldn't afford $30,000 in legal fees. My savings would be wiped out. Claire must have seen my expression because she spoke up quickly. Dorothy, don't worry about the money right now. If it comes to that, we'll figure something out. The important thing is protecting you. Patricia nodded. Claire's right. And Mrs. Castellano, let me be clear, your son is trying to steal your house and your life savings. Spending money to prevent that isn't an expense, it's an investment in protecting what's yours. You've worked your entire life to build this security. Don't let fear of legal costs make you vulnerable to losing everything. She was right, of course. What good was my savings if I lost control of it to a guardian who would drain it anyway? All right, I said. Let's do it. All of it. Whatever it takes to protect myself. Patricia smiled, the first genuine warmth I'd seen from her. Good. That's the spirit. Now, let's talk strategy. I don't want you to tell Marcus about any of these legal changes. Don't mention the new power of attorney, the trust, or any of it. Let him continue with his plan, thinking you're unprotected. Won't he find out eventually? Eventually, yes. But by the time he does, it'll be too late. The documents will be executed and filed. You'll have demonstrated your capacity through multiple independent evaluations. And his case for guardianship will have crumbled before he even realizes what's happening. I thought about the airport, about being left alone and confused while Marcus and Sienna flew off to their vacation. I thought about that email with its false narrative and manipulative concern. I want to do more than just protect myself, I said quietly. I want him to face consequences for what he's trying to do. Patricia's smile turned sharp. Oh, we can absolutely do that. Once we have you protected, we can explore options for exposing his fraud and manipulation. But first things first, let's make sure you're safe. Monday afternoon, the evaluation. Dr. Raymond Chen's office was located in the Meridian Bay Medical Plaza, a modern building that housed various medical specialists. His waiting room was calm and professional, decorated in soothing blues and grays, with comfortable seating and soft lighting. Dr. Chen himself was a man in his early 60s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner that immediately put me at ease. He spent the first 20 minutes of our appointment just talking with me about my life, my health history, my daily routines, and my concerns about what was happening with Marcus. Mrs. Castellano, he said finally, before we begin any formal testing, I want you to understand what we're doing and why. You've described a situation where your son appears to be building a case that you're experiencing cognitive decline. Our goal today is to establish an objective baseline of your actual cognitive function. I'm going to administer several standard tests that measure memory, attention, language, and executive function. These aren't pass-fail tests. They're measurement tools that show how your brain is functioning compared to age-appropriate norms. Will it be difficult? Some parts might be challenging, which is normal and expected. If you find yourself struggling with a particular task, that doesn't mean you're failing, it just gives us information about specific areas of cognitive function. The important thing is to try your best and not get frustrated if something is hard. The evaluation took nearly 2 hours. Dr. Chen asked me to remember lists of words, draw shapes, solve simple math problems, identify objects, follow complex instructions, and perform various other tasks. Some were easy, some were genuinely challenging. Through it all, he was patient and encouraging, never making me feel inadequate when I struggled. When we finished, I felt mentally exhausted but oddly satisfied. I'd done my best, and I felt like I'd performed well overall. How did I do? I asked. Dr. Chen smiled. I'll need to score everything formally and write up a complete report, but I can tell you preliminarily that you performed very well. Your memory is excellent for your age. Your attention and concentration are strong. Your language skills are outstanding, which isn't surprising given that you told me you read extensively. And your executive function, your ability to plan, organize, and think flexibly, is entirely age-appropriate. Relief flooded through me. So there's no sign of dementia or cognitive impairment? None whatsoever. You show absolutely no indicators of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, or any other neurocognitive disorder. Your cognitive profile is that of a healthy, intelligent 70-year-old woman. Could another doctor evaluate me and come to a different conclusion? He understood what I was really asking. Mrs. Castellano, cognitive assessment isn't a matter of opinion when it's done properly and objectively. If another doctor were to administer these same standardized tests, they would get essentially the same scores and reach the same conclusion. The only way a doctor could diagnose you with cognitive impairment would be to either administer the tests incorrectly, score them incorrectly, or simply fabricate a diagnosis without proper evaluation. And that happens? Unfortunately, yes. There are unethical practitioners in every field. Some doctors are willing to provide whatever diagnosis someone is paying them to provide, regardless of the actual evidence. But such diagnoses don't hold up under scrutiny from competent, ethical professionals. I'll have your formal report by Wednesday, he continued. It will include all your test scores, comparisons to age-appropriate norms, and my professional conclusion that you show no signs of cognitive impairment. This document can be submitted to court if necessary, and I'm willing to testify on your behalf if a guardianship petition is filed. Thank you, Dr. Chen. Thank you so much. You're welcome. And Mrs. Castellano? I'm sorry this is happening to you. Elder financial abuse is one of the most heartbreaking things I see in my practice. But you're doing exactly the right thing by protecting yourself proactively. Too many people wait until it's too late. Monday evening, the realization. I drove home from Dr. Chen's office feeling both exhausted and empowered. I'd spent the day fighting back, seeing a lawyer, getting evaluated, taking concrete steps to protect myself. For the first time since Friday's airport abandonment, I felt like I wasn't just a victim waiting for Marcus to destroy me. But I still didn't understand one thing: the airport incident itself. Why had that been necessary? If Marcus wanted to build a case that I was confused and declining, why not just document normal interactions where he claimed I seemed forgetful? Why orchestrate something so elaborate and cruel? I was making dinner, just a simple pasta with vegetables, when my phone rang. It was Helen Pritchard, my neighbor. "Dorothy, dear, I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all, Helen. What's up?" "Well, it's probably nothing, but there was a man here earlier today asking about you. He came to my door around lunchtime and said he was from Meridian Bay Adult Protective Services, doing a wellness check." My blood ran cold. "A wellness check?" "Yes. He asked if I'd noticed any changes in your behavior lately, whether you seemed confused or forgetful, whether you were managing to take care of yourself and your property. He seemed particularly interested in whether you'd had any incidents where you seemed disoriented or lost." "What did you tell him?" "I told him you were perfectly fine, sharp as a tack, and I didn't appreciate him asking intrusive questions about my neighbor. He gave me his card and asked me to call if I noticed any concerning changes." "Dorothy, is everything all right? You're not in some kind of trouble, are you?" "No, Helen. But I think my son might be trying to cause trouble." "Did you keep that card he gave you?" "Yes, it's right here on my counter." "Could you bring it over? I'd like to see it." "Of course, dear. I'll be right there." 5 minutes later, Helen stood in my kitchen, handing me a business card. It read, "Thomas Brennan, Senior Case Manager, Meridian Bay Adult Protective Services," with a phone number and email address. "Helen, can you describe what this man looked like?" "Oh, let's see. 50s, I'd say. Tall, maybe 6 feet. Brown hair going gray at the temples. Wearing a suit, very professional looking. He had a clipboard and everything." I pulled out my laptop and searched for Thomas Brennan, Meridian Bay Adult Protective Services. Nothing came up. No listings for anyone by that name. I tried the phone number on the card, disconnected. The email address bounced back as non-existent. "Helen, I don't think this man was really from Adult Protective Services." "What?" "But he had a card, and he seemed so official. I think my son sent him. I think Marcus hired someone to go around my neighborhood asking questions, building a case that I'm declining. This fake APS visit, combined with the airport incident, gives him evidence to present to a judge." Helen's sweet, wrinkled face hardened with anger. "That's despicable. What kind of son does that to his own mother? The kind who values money more than family." I looked at the fake business card in my hand. "Helen, did anyone else in the neighborhood talk to this man?" "I saw him going to several houses. The Kowalskis next door, the Pattersons across the street, maybe 3 or 4 others. I need to talk to them, find out what they said. If they told him I seemed confused or had problems, Marcus could use that. The thing is, Dorothy, you know how people are. If someone in an official capacity asks if you've noticed anything unusual, people start inventing things to be helpful. Well, now that you mention it, I did think she seemed a bit lost when I saw her at the grocery store. That sort of thing." She was right. Confirmation bias was real. Once you planted the suggestion that someone was declining, people started reinterpreting normal behavior as evidence of problems. "Tomorrow I'm going to talk to everyone who spoke with this man," I said. "I need to know exactly what was said. And I'm going to document everything: the fake business card, the disconnected phone number, the fact that no one by this name works for APS. This is fraud, Helen. My son is committing fraud. What can I do to help?" "You've already helped by telling me about this. But if you wouldn't mind writing down everything you remember about the conversation, exactly what questions he asked, exactly what you said, that would be useful. And if you're willing, you might need to testify about this if there's a court case." "I'll write it all down tonight," Helen said firmly. "And Dorothy?" I'll testify anytime, anywhere. What Marcus is doing is wrong, and I won't stand by and let it happen. After Helen left, I sat at my kitchen table with my cold pasta and realized something important. The airport incident hadn't just been about making me look confused. It had been a test run of Marcus's entire narrative. He could tell people, my mother insisted she was going on vacation even though I'd cancelled it. She showed up at the airport without a ticket, completely confused. I'm so worried about her. She's clearly not able to manage on her own anymore. And now he had this fake APS investigation to back it up. I was so concerned that I contacted Adult Protective Services. They confirmed that neighbors have noticed troubling changes in her behavior. It was elegant, in a horrible way. Creating a crisis, then claiming to be the concerned son trying to help. But he'd made a mistake. He'd underestimated me. He thought a 70-year-old woman would be too confused, too hurt, too passive to fight back. He was wrong. I opened my laptop and created a new document. I titled it Evidence of Marcus Castellano's Fraud, and began documenting everything: the fake APS visit, the manipulative email, the airport abandonment, Claire's testimony about his questions to the children, Dr. Chen's evaluation results, Patricia Vance's legal analysis. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore. This was about making sure Marcus faced consequences for what he tried to do. My phone buzzed with a text message. Marcus. Hi Mom. Hope you're doing okay. Just wanted to confirm you're still planning to see Dr. Whitmore tomorrow at 2 p.m. It's really important that we understand what's going on with your memory. Love you. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I wrote back. Hi sweetheart. I appreciate your concern, but I'm going to discuss any health questions with Dr. Morrison at my regular appointment next month. I hope your work emergency has been resolved. Love, Mom. Polite. Non-confrontational. Completely unhelpful to his plans. His response came within seconds. Mom, please don't be stubborn about this. The appointment is already scheduled. Dr. Whitmore is a specialist. Dr. Morrison is just a general practitioner. You need a real expert. I didn't respond. Let him wonder. Let him worry that his plan wasn't working as smoothly as he'd expected. Tomorrow I would continue gathering evidence. I would talk to the neighbors. I would document everything. And then, when the time was right, I would make sure Marcus understood exactly what he'd lost when he decided to betray his own mother. I woke up Tuesday morning with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. My kitchen table was covered with notes, documents, and lists of tasks. Today I would talk to every neighbor who'd been visited by that fake APS investigator. I needed to know exactly what had been said, what impressions had been created, and what damage control was necessary. I started with a fresh pot of coffee and a printed list of addresses. Helen had identified 5 houses besides her own where she'd seen the man go: the Kowalskis next door, the Pattersons across the street, the Ramirez family 3 houses down, the elderly Mr. Finnegan at the corner, and the Chens who'd moved in last year 2 doors to the left. At 8:30, I knocked on the Kowalskis' door. Barbara Kowalski answered, a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and gardening gloves on her hands. Dorothy. What a nice surprise. I was just tending to my tomatoes. Would you like to come in? Actually, Barbara, I was hoping to talk to you about something specific. Did a man claiming to be from Adult Protective Services visit you yesterday? Her expression shifted, becoming uncomfortable. Oh. Yes, he did. Dorothy, I hope I didn't cause you any trouble. He asked some questions about you, and I tried to be helpful. I'm not upset with you at all, I assured her quickly. But that man wasn't really from APS. I think my son hired him to gather false information about me. I need to know exactly what was asked and what you said. Barbara's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. Dorothy, I'm so sorry. He seemed so official, and I just assumed he was legitimate. Come in, please. Let me tell you everything I remember. We sat at her kitchen table while she recounted the conversation. The fake investigator had asked whether she'd noticed any changes in my behavior, whether I seemed confused about what day it was or where I was going, whether my house was being properly maintained, whether I'd had any accidents or falls. I told him you seemed perfectly fine to me, Barbara said. But then he asked specifically about the last few times I'd seen you, and I mentioned that you'd seemed a bit distracted last week when we chatted over the fence. I said you seemed like you had something on your mind. Dorothy, I was just making conversation. I didn't mean to imply there was anything wrong with you. Barbara, having something on your mind isn't a sign of cognitive decline. Everyone gets distracted sometimes. Did he write that down like it was significant? He did. He made a note on his clipboard and asked if you'd seemed to know who I was and where you were. I told him of course you did, that we'd had a perfectly normal conversation about the weather and my grandson's graduation. But the way he was writing things down made me feel like everything I said was being interpreted as evidence of a problem. This was exactly what I'd feared. Normal human behavior was being reframed as symptoms of decline. Did he give you his card? Yes, and he asked me to call if I noticed any concerning changes in your behavior. He said the state was trying to make sure elderly residents were safe and had appropriate support systems. Do you still have the card? Barbara retrieved it from her refrigerator where it had been stuck under a magnet. It was identical to the one Helen had shown me, same fake name, same disconnected number. Barbara, would you be willing to write down everything you remember about this conversation and sign a statement that this man misrepresented himself? Absolutely. Dorothy, I feel terrible about this. If I'd known he wasn't legitimate, I would never have answered his questions. You couldn't have known. That's the whole point of his fraud, to seem official and trustworthy. The pattern repeated at each house. The Pattersons had told the investigator I seemed a bit slower than I used to be when walking to my mailbox, a comment about my pace due to arthritis that was being twisted into cognitive decline. Mr. Finnegan had mentioned he'd seen me standing in my driveway once looking at my car keys, which he thought meant I'd forgotten where I parked, when in reality, I'd been checking to make sure I had my keys before going back inside for my purse. Each innocent observation, each normal behavior, had been documented and reframed as evidence of incompetence. The Ramirez family provided the most disturbing information. They'd told the investigator that they hadn't noticed any problems with me at all, that I seemed perfectly healthy and capable. According to Maria Ramirez, the man had seemed disappointed by this answer. He kept pushing, Maria told me, her dark eyes flashing with anger now that she understood what had really been happening. He asked if we were certain, if maybe we just weren't paying close enough attention. He suggested that sometimes neighbors don't want to admit they've seen problems because they don't want to get involved. It felt like he was trying to get us to say something negative about you even though we had nothing negative to say. Did you eventually tell him something he wanted to hear? She looked ashamed. I mentioned that once I'd seen you outside in your bathrobe getting your newspaper. He acted like that was very significant, wrote it down immediately. But Dorothy, this was like 6 in the morning. Who doesn't go outside in their bathrobe to get the newspaper at 6 a.m.? I squeezed her hand. Maria, you have nothing to apologize for. This man was skilled at manipulation. He knew exactly what questions to ask and how to interpret innocent answers to fit his narrative. By noon, I'd talked to all 5 households and collected written statements from each one. The picture that emerged was damning, not of me, but of Marcus and his hired investigator. They'd engaged in systematic fraud, impersonating a government official, and deliberately distorting normal behavior to create false evidence of cognitive decline. I returned home, organized all the statements into a folder, and added them to my growing collection of evidence. Then I called Patricia Vance. Patricia, it's Dorothy Castellano. I have new information about Marcus's fraud that you need to see. Tuesday afternoon, the legal documents. I met Patricia at her office at 2 p.m., the exact time Marcus had tried to get me to see Dr. Whitmore. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Marcus thought I was being evaluated for dementia, I was actually meeting with my lawyer to finalize documents that would destroy his guardianship scheme. Patricia reviewed the neighbor statements with barely contained fury. This is actionable fraud, she said. Impersonating a government official, creating false documentation, deliberately gathering misleading information, these are crimes. If Marcus files a guardianship petition using evidence from this fake investigation, we can not only defeat the petition but potentially have him charged criminally. Good, I said, and meant it. What about the other documents? Patricia pulled out a thick folder. I've drafted everything we discussed. Let's go through each document so you understand what you're signing. She walked me through the durable power of attorney that named Claire as my agent for financial decisions, the healthcare directive that specified my wishes for medical care and named Claire as my healthcare proxy, and the revocable living trust that would hold my house and major assets. The trust is key, Patricia explained. As trustee of your own trust, you maintain complete control over your assets. You can buy, sell, mortgage, or do anything else you want with the house. But if you were to become incapacitated, Claire as successor trustee would manage everything according to your instructions. This makes it nearly impossible for Marcus to claim you need a guardian to manage your property. What happens to the house when I die? The trust includes distribution instructions. You've named Marcus as the ultimate beneficiary, so the house will still go to him after your death. But only after your death, and only if you haven't changed those instructions in the meantime. The trust gives you complete flexibility. Can I change the beneficiary if I want? Patricia's smile was grim. Absolutely. At any time, for any reason. If Marcus continues this behavior, you might decide he doesn't deserve to inherit your home. That's entirely your choice. The thought gave me a dark satisfaction. Marcus was trying to steal my house while I was alive. How would he feel knowing that his actions might cost him the inheritance entirely? We spent 2 hours reviewing every clause, every provision, every detail. Patricia had done excellent work. The documents were airtight, leaving no openings for Marcus to exploit. When can we execute these? I asked. I've arranged for a notary to come tomorrow at 10 a.m. We'll also have 2 additional witnesses present, both attorneys from my firm who can testify if needed that you were completely competent when signing these documents. We'll videotape the entire signing ceremony, including me asking you questions about whether you understand what you're signing and whether anyone has pressured or coerced you. You're very thorough. With a case like this, we can't be too careful. Marcus will challenge these documents if he can. We need to make them absolutely bulletproof. As I was preparing to leave, Patricia asked, "How are you holding up emotionally? This must be incredibly stressful." I considered the question. I thought I'd be devastated. My only son is trying to steal from me, to control me, to essentially take away my autonomy and independence. But mostly what I feel is angry. And determined. He underestimated me, Patricia. He thought I'd be an easy target. Clearly he doesn't know his mother very well. No, he doesn't. Not anymore. Maybe he never did. Tuesday evening, the confrontation. I was making dinner when my doorbell rang at 6:15. I looked through the peephole and saw Marcus standing on my porch, alone. My heart rate spiked, but I took a deep breath and opened the door. Marcus. This is a surprise. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Hi, Mom. Can I come in? I was worried when you didn't show up for your appointment with Dr. Whitmore today. I stepped aside to let him in, studying him carefully. He was dressed in business casual, expensive jeans, a button-down shirt that probably cost $200. He looked successful, confident, like someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. I told you I preferred to wait for my regular appointment with Dr. Morrison, I said calmly. Mom, please sit down. We need to talk. He gestured toward my living room like he owned the place. I followed him, sitting in my favorite armchair while he took the sofa. The positioning felt deliberate, him in the larger piece of furniture, trying to dominate the space. I'm concerned about you, he began. The incident at the airport, missing your doctor's appointment today, and I've heard from several of your neighbors that they've noticed changes in your behavior. There it was. The fake investigation being used as evidence. What neighbors? I asked innocently. I'd rather not say specifically. I don't want them to feel like they've betrayed your confidence. But multiple people have reached out to express concern about you living alone in this big house, managing everything on your own. Lies. All lies. The neighbors hadn't reached out to him, he'd sent someone to question them. Marcus, I'm 70 years old, not 90. I'm perfectly capable of managing my own life. Are you? He leaned forward, his expression earnest but his eyes calculating. Mom, be honest. Don't you sometimes forget things? Feel confused about what day it is? Struggle to keep track of appointments? No, I said flatly. I don't experience any of those things. But the airport dash. What about the airport, Marcus? You invited me on vacation, didn't book me a ticket, then abandoned me there. That wasn't my confusion. That was your deception. His expression flickered, just for a moment, surprise and something darker crossing his face before the mask of concern returned. Mom, that's not what happened. I called you Thursday night to tell you the trip was cancelled. We had a conversation about it. You said you understood. There was no phone call Thursday night. There was. Check your phone records if you don't believe me. He'd thought of that. Of course he had. He'd probably made a call that went to voicemail or lasted just a few seconds, enough to show up in phone records as evidence of his attempt to contact me. Even if you called, which I don't remember, that doesn't explain why you didn't book me a ticket in the first place. I did book you a ticket. You must have gotten confused about the confirmation details. When I called Thursday night to cancel, I offered to help you cancel your ticket too, but you insisted you'd handle it yourself. The lies were so smooth, so practiced. He'd rehearsed this narrative carefully. Marcus, why are you doing this? I asked quietly. Doing what? Trying to help my mother who's clearly struggling? I'm not struggling. I'm healthy, competent, and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Mom, denial is a common symptom of cognitive decline. People don't realize they're having problems because the same mental processes that would allow them to recognize the problems are the ones that are deteriorating. It was a clever argument. Anything I said to defend my competence could be dismissed as denial. I've been evaluated by a geriatric psychiatrist, I said. Dr. Raymond Chen. He performed comprehensive cognitive testing and found no signs of impairment whatsoever. Marcus's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. You went to see a psychiatrist? Mom, why didn't you tell me? Who is this Dr. Chen? Did someone recommend him to you? I found him myself. And his evaluation clearly shows I'm competent. One evaluation doesn't mean much, Marcus said dismissively. Cognitive decline fluctuates. You might perform well on a test one day and be completely confused the next. That's why ongoing monitoring is so important. By Dr. Whitmore, the dementia specialist you tried to send me to? Dr. Whitmore is an expert in age-related cognitive issues. He would be able to to diagnose me with something I don't have? I interrupted. Marcus, I know what you're trying to do. What am I trying to do, Mom? His voice had gone cold. You're trying to have me declared incompetent so you can gain control of my assets. Specifically, this house. The silence that followed was heavy and dangerous. Marcus stared at me, and for the first time since he'd arrived, the mask of concern completely dropped away. What remained was cold calculation. That's a very serious accusation, he said slowly. If you're making paranoid accusations against family members, that might itself be a sign of Don't, I said sharply. Don't you dare try to use my recognition of your scheme as evidence of incompetence. I'm not paranoid. I'm perceptive. And I've documented everything you've done. What have I done, exactly? He was trying to regain control of the conversation. I've tried to help you. I've expressed concern about your well-being. I've arranged medical consultations. Those aren't crimes, Mom. Those are the actions of a caring son. You hired someone to impersonate an adult protective services investigator to go around my neighborhood gathering false evidence against me. His face went carefully blank. I have no idea what you're talking about. Thomas Brennan. Except there's no one by that name working for APS. The phone number on his business card is disconnected. The email bounces. And I have written statements from 5 neighbors describing his fraudulent investigation. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder, more honest in its hostility. You've been busy. Yes, I have. Mom, you need to think very carefully about what you're doing. If you fight me on this, it's going to get ugly. Legal battles are expensive and stressful. At your age, that kind of stress could be genuinely dangerous to your health. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. I'm trying to look out for your best interests. My best interests? My voice rose despite my intention to stay calm. My best interests would have been having a son who loved and respected me. Instead, I have a son who's trying to steal my home while I'm still alive to see it happen. This house is too much for you, Marcus said. You're 70 years old, living alone in a 3-story Victorian that needs constant maintenance. The property taxes alone must be a burden. I'm offering you a solution. Let me help you transition to somewhere more appropriate, somewhere you'd be safe and comfortable. You mean somewhere you could control me? I mean somewhere like Meadowbrook Senior Living. Nice apartments, social activities, medical staff on site. You'd have support and community. Meadowbrook Senior Living. I knew that place. It was one of those expensive senior facilities that charged outrageous monthly fees while providing minimal actual care. Residents signed over their assets to pay for their stay, and families inherited whatever was left, which was usually very little. And what would happen to this house if I moved to Meadowbrook? Well, it would need to be sold, obviously. You'd need the proceeds to pay for your care. And you, as my guardian, would handle that sale? If necessary, yes. But I'd make sure you got a fair price. How generous. Tell me, Marcus, would you get a fair price? Or would you sell it to yourself or one of your associates at below market value? His jaw tightened. You're being paranoid. I'm being realistic. This house is worth $850,000. I imagine it would be quite convenient for you to gain control of an asset that valuable. Mom, I don't need your money. I have a successful career, a good income. And yet you're here, trying to manipulate me into giving up my independence and my home. If you don't need my money, why are you doing this? Because you need help. His voice rose, finally showing real emotion. Because I watched my father work himself to death to provide for this family, and I watched you struggle alone after he died, and I don't want to see you spend your final years struggling to maintain a house that's too big for you. For just a moment, I saw something genuine in his anger. Pain, perhaps. Resentment. Old wounds that had never healed. Your father's death was tragic, I said quietly. But I didn't struggle, Marcus. I worked hard, yes. I made sacrifices, yes. But I provided you with a good life. I put you through college. I helped you start your career. And I did it all while maintaining this home, this piece of family history. Maybe you shouldn't have, he said bitterly. Maybe you should have sold this place years ago and used the money to live instead of just survive. Is that what this is about? You think I wasted my life maintaining this house? You think I should have spent my inheritance so you could have more while I was alive? I think you prioritized a building over your own happiness. This building is my happiness, Marcus. It's my history, my security, my accomplishment. And it's mine to do with as I please. Not if you're incompetent to manage it. Maybe you shouldn't have, he said bitterly. Maybe you should have sold this place years ago and used the money to live instead of just survive. Is that what this is about? You think I wasted my life maintaining this house? You think I should have spent my inheritance so you could have more while I was alive? I think you prioritized a building over your own happiness. This building is my happiness, Marcus. It's my history, my security, my accomplishment. And it's mine to do with as I please. Not if you're incompetent to manage it. There it was. The real threat, finally spoken aloud. I'm not incompetent. I have medical evaluations proving it. I have legal representation. And I have evidence of your fraud. Marcus stood up abruptly. Then I guess we'll see what a judge thinks. Are you filing for guardianship? I'm doing what's necessary to protect my mother from her own poor judgment. Marcus, if you file that petition, I will fight you. And I will win. And when I do, I'll make sure everyone knows what you tried to do. Good luck with that, Mom. I have evidence from your neighbors. I have documentation of your confusion and poor decision-making. I have medical professionals ready to testify. You have what? The word of your ex-daughter-in-law and one doctor you found on your own? I have the truth. The truth is whatever a judge decides it is. He walked toward the door, then turned back. I'll give you one more chance to do this the easy way. Sign a power of attorney naming me as your agent. Let me help you find appropriate housing. Do this voluntarily, and it can all be handled quietly and with dignity. And if I refuse? Then we do this in court. Publicly. Expensively. And Mom? You'll lose. You'll spend all your savings on lawyers, you'll be humiliated in front of the whole community, and in the end, you'll still end up with me as your guardian. Except by then, you'll have nothing left. Get out of my house. Think about what I said. You have until Friday to give me your answer. After that, I file the petition. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. I stood in my living room, shaking with rage and adrenaline, and realized something important. Marcus had just threatened me. Explicitly. He'd laid out his entire plan and given me an ultimatum. And I'd recorded every word of it. The small recording device Patricia had suggested I keep in my pocket had captured the entire conversation. Marcus's threats, his admission of the guardianship plan, his contempt for my autonomy, all of it documented in his own words. I pulled out the recorder and played back a portion. Then we do this in court. Publicly. Expensively. And Mom? You'll lose. Perfect. Clear. Undeniable. I immediately called Patricia and sent her the audio file. Dorothy, this is gold, she said after listening to the recording. He just admitted to planning a fraudulent guardianship petition. He threatened you. He tried to coerce you into signing documents under duress. This recording alone could defeat any petition he files. He said I have until Friday to give him an answer. That's 3 days. Which means we need to execute your legal documents tomorrow as planned. Once those are filed and recorded, even if he files a guardianship petition, he'll be fighting uphill against clearly documented evidence of your competence and your wishes. Patricia, I want to do more than just defend myself. I want him to face consequences. We can file a complaint with the state bar if he files a frivolous guardianship petition. We can report the fake APS investigation to the police. We can pursue civil remedies for emotional distress and attempted fraud. But Dorothy, you need to be prepared, going after your own son is going to be painful. He stopped being my son when he decided to destroy me for money. Wednesday morning, the signing ceremony. Patricia's conference room was set up like a small courtroom. A video camera on a tripod pointed at the head of the table where I would sit. 2 attorneys from Patricia's firm, Robert Chen and Maria Rodriguez, sat to one side as witnesses. A notary public, a stern-looking woman named Barbara Whitfield, arranged her stamp and seal book on the table. Mrs. Castellano, Patricia began, speaking clearly for the camera, today is Wednesday, October 16th. We're here to execute several legal documents that you've requested. Before we begin, I need to ask you some questions to establish your understanding and competence. Do you understand why you're here today? Yes, I said clearly. I'm here to sign a durable power of attorney, a healthcare directive, and a revocable living trust. Has anyone forced, coerced, or pressured you to sign these documents? No. This is entirely my decision. Do you understand what each document does? Yes. The power of attorney gives Claire Donovan authority to manage my financial affairs if I become unable to do so. The healthcare directive specifies my wishes for medical treatment and names Claire as my healthcare proxy. The trust holds my house and major assets, with me as trustee and Claire as successor trustee if I become incapacitated. Patricia walked me through each document, asking me to read key provisions aloud and explain them in my own words. For 30 minutes, I answered questions, demonstrated my understanding, and articulated my reasoning for each decision. Why did you choose Claire Donovan as your agent rather than your son, Marcus Castellano? Because I trust Claire to act in my best interests. I don't believe Marcus would do the same. Why not? Because he's currently attempting to have me declared incompetent so he can gain control of my assets. He's hired people to create false evidence of my cognitive decline. He's threatened me with legal action if I don't voluntarily give him control of my finances. He's made it clear that he values my property more than my well-being. It hurt to say it aloud, but it was necessary. This recording would be part of the permanent record, evidence of my competence and my reasoning. When the questioning was complete, I signed each document. Patricia, Robert, Maria, and Barbara all added their signatures as appropriate. The notary stamped each page with her official seal. These documents are now executed and legally binding, Patricia announced for the camera. The power of attorney and healthcare directive will be filed with the county clerk's office today. The trust documents will be recorded as part of the property record for the house on Sycamore Lane. Mrs. Castellano, you now have comprehensive legal protection in place. After the cameras were turned off, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was done. No matter what Marcus tried now, he couldn't claim I was incompetent when I'd clearly demonstrated my capacity in a properly witnessed, notarized, and videotaped ceremony. What happens now? I asked Patricia. Now we wait. If Marcus files a guardianship petition, we respond with all of this evidence, your cognitive evaluation, these legal documents, the recording of his threats, the neighbor statements about the fake investigation. We bury him in proof that you're competent and that his petition is fraudulent. And if he doesn't file? Then we've protected you from any future attempts. But Dorothy, based on your conversation last night, I think he will file. He's invested too much in this scheme to walk away now. His deadline was Friday, which means he's probably planning to file this week. I'm ready, I said. Whatever happens, I'm ready. Wednesday afternoon, the call from Claire. I was home organizing my evidence files when Claire called, her voice tight with stress. Dorothy, Marcus just left my house. He came by asking questions about you. What kind of questions? He wanted to know if I'd noticed any changes in your behavior lately. Whether you'd seemed confused or forgetful. Whether I thought you were still capable of living independently. What did you tell him? I told him you were perfectly fine and that I didn't appreciate him fishing for negative information about you. Then he asked if I'd been influencing you. He said he knew we'd been spending a lot of time together lately and he was concerned that I might be manipulating you for my own benefit. I laughed bitterly. That's rich. He's trying to steal my house, but I'm being manipulated? He also asked about your finances. Whether you'd talk to me about money, whether I'd loaned you money or vice versa. Dorothy, I think he's trying to build a case that I'm the one taking advantage of you, not him. That makes sense, actually. If he can convince a judge that you're manipulating me, he can challenge the power of attorney I just gave you. Can he do that? Patricia says it would be difficult given how clearly I demonstrated my competence during the signing ceremony. But Marcus is going to try everything he can. There's something else, Claire said. He asked about Lily and Thomas. He wanted to know if they'd said anything about you seeming different lately. And Dorothy, he specifically asked if they'd be willing to testify in court about their observations. My blood ran cold. He wants to put my grandchildren on a witness stand to testify against me? I told him absolutely not. I told him if he tried to involve the children in this situation, I'd get a restraining order. He backed off, but Dorothy, the fact that he even suggested it shows how desperate he is, I finished. He's running out of options, so he's willing to traumatize his own children to get what he wants. What kind of man has he become? Claire's voice cracked. This isn't the person I married. That Marcus would never have done something like this. Power and greed change people, I said quietly. Or maybe they just reveal who people always were underneath. We talked for a few more minutes, and Claire promised to document Marcus's visit and send me a written statement about what he'd asked. More evidence for the growing pile. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about my grandchildren. Lily was 14, Thomas was 12. They were good kids, smart and kind. They loved me, called me regularly, visited when they could. Would Marcus really put them through the trauma of testifying in court? Would he coach them to say things that would hurt me? Would he use their love for me as a weapon against me? Yes, I realized. He would. Because at this point, Marcus saw me not as his mother but as an obstacle to what he wanted. And he'd proven he was willing to do anything to remove that obstacle. My phone buzzed with a text message. Sienna. Dorothy, Marcus told me about your conversation yesterday. I want you to know that everything he's doing comes from a place of love and concern. He's worried about you. We both are. Please consider accepting his help before this situation becomes more difficult for everyone. I stared at the message, anger burning in my chest. Sienna, the woman who'd broken up my son's marriage, who'd systematically isolated him from his family, who'd turned him into someone willing to betray his own mother, she had the audacity to text me about love and concern. I wrote back, Sienna, I appreciate your message. Please know that I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs, and I have all the support I need. I hope you and Marcus find peace with your choices. Polite. Non-confrontational. Completely unhelpful to their plans. Her response came quickly, we're trying to help you, Dorothy. I hope you realize that before it's too late. Too late for what? I wondered. Too late to voluntarily surrender. Too late to avoid a court battle. Too late to preserve what little relationship remained between Marcus and me. That relationship was already gone. Marcus had destroyed it the moment he chose money over family. Wednesday evening, the discovery. I was making dinner, just a simple chicken breast with roasted vegetables, when something occurred to me. Marcus had been so confident yesterday. So certain that he had evidence, medical professionals ready to testify, a case that I couldn't possibly win. What medical professionals? He'd tried to get me to see Dr. Whitmore, but I'd refused. Unless. I pulled out my laptop and searched for Dr. Gerald Whitmore, Meridian Bay. His website came up immediately, featuring his credentials, his specialty in dementia and Alzheimer's disease, and testimonials from grateful families. Then I clicked on the About Dr. Whitmore page and found something interesting. Dr. Whitmore was listed as a consultant for Pemberton Logistics and affiliated companies. Pemberton Logistics. Marcus's employer. I dug deeper, searching for connections between Dr. Whitmore and Pemberton. It didn't take long to find them. Dr. Whitmore had served as an expert witness in at least 3 guardianship cases over the past 5 years, all involving employees or family members of employees from Pemberton Logistics. In each case, Dr. Whitmore had testified that the individual in question suffered from significant cognitive impairment requiring guardianship. In each case, the petition had been granted. This wasn't just Marcus hiring a willing doctor. This was Pemberton Logistics having a tame expert on retainer for exactly this kind of situation. I called Patricia immediately. Dorothy, I was just about to call you. I've been doing some research on Dr. Whitmore. So have I. He works for Pemberton Logistics. Not just that. He's been sanctioned by the state medical board twice for providing expert testimony that wasn't supported by proper evaluation. He's still licensed, but he's on probation. If he diagnosed you with cognitive impairment without actually examining you properly, he could lose his license entirely. Marcus was going to pay him to give me a diagnosis regardless of what any actual testing showed. That's what it looks like. And Dorothy, there's more. I pulled the court files from those 3 previous guardianship cases where Whitmore testified. In all three cases, the guardians were connected to Pemberton Logistics. And in all three cases, the individuals who were placed under guardianship had significant assets that were liquidated after the guardianship was established. It's a pattern. It's more than a pattern. It's a systematic scheme. Pemberton Logistics identifies employees or family members with assets, manufactures evidence of incompetence, uses Dr. Whitmore to provide medical cover, gets guardianship established, then liquidates the assets. How is this legal? How have they been getting away with it? Because guardianship proceedings are usually private, and family members typically don't have the resources or knowledge to fight back effectively. Most people don't realize what's happening until it's too late. By the time they understand the scope of the fraud, they're already under guardianship and have no legal standing to challenge it. I felt sick. Marcus isn't just trying to steal from me. He's part of a criminal enterprise. That's exactly what this is. And Dorothy, this is bigger than just protecting you now. If we can document this pattern and expose it, we might be able to help other victims. What do? We document everything. We continue gathering evidence. And when Marcus files his guardianship petition, which I'm now certain he will, we don't just defend against it. We expose the entire scheme. We bring in the state attorney general's office. We make sure this pattern of abuse gets investigated and shut down. After I hung up with Patricia, I sat at my kitchen table feeling overwhelmed. This had started as a personal betrayal, my son trying to steal my house. Now it was expanding into something much larger and darker. How many other families had been destroyed by this scheme? How many elderly people were currently living under fraudulent guardianships, their assets being drained by corrupt guardians working? The call came at 9:30 Thursday morning. Patricia's voice was tight with controlled anger. Dorothy, Marcus filed the guardianship petition this morning. He didn't wait until Friday. He filed early, probably hoping to catch us off guard. My stomach dropped despite knowing this was coming. What does it say? It's worse than I expected. He's alleging you have advanced dementia, that you're a danger to yourself, that you've made threats of self-harm, and that you've been financially exploited by Claire. None of it is true, but he's painted a picture of someone in severe crisis. When's the hearing? That's the problem. He's requested an emergency hearing, claiming immediate danger. The judge scheduled it for Monday morning. That gives us 4 days to prepare. 4 days. Marcus had calculated this perfectly: file on Thursday, get an emergency hearing on Monday, catch me before I could mount a proper defense. Except I already had my defense prepared. Patricia, we have everything we need. The cognitive evaluation, the legal documents, the recording of his threats, the evidence of the fake investigation, the connection to Dr. Whitmore and Pemberton Logistics. Did you know that Dr. Whitmore has testified in at least 3 previous guardianship cases involving Pemberton Logistics employees, and in all 3 cases, substantial assets were liquidated after guardianship was established? I don't know anything about those cases. Patricia pulled out the recordings. Mr. Castellano, is this your voice saying, then we do this in court? Publicly. Expensively. And Mom, you'll lose? Marcus's face went pale as his own threats played in the courtroom. Is this your voice threatening your mother that she would end up with nothing if she didn't comply with your demands? I was trying to help her understand Dash. You were trying to coerce her into signing over control of her assets. That's not help, Mr. Castellano. That's extortion. The hearing continued for 3 hours. Patricia presented Dr. Chen's cognitive evaluation, showing I had no impairment. She presented the videotaped signing ceremony, showing my clear competence. She presented the neighbor statements about the fake APS investigation. She presented documentation of the Pemberton Logistics guardianship scheme. Marcus's case fell apart completely. Judge Foster called a recess, then returned with her decision. I've reviewed all the evidence presented today. Mrs. Castellano has clearly demonstrated her mental competence. She has appropriate legal protections in place. The claims made in this petition are not supported by credible evidence. In fact, The evidence suggests this petition was filed in bad faith as part of an attempt to fraudulently gain control of Mrs. Castellano's assets. The petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of potential criminal fraud. Mr. Castellano, you're fortunate your mother is more merciful than you deserve. 3 months later. I stood on my front porch on a crisp January morning, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over my neighborhood. My house, still mine, still standing, still filled with 4 generations of Castellano family history. Marcus had been charged with attempted fraud and conspiracy. He'd pled guilty in exchange for probation and restitution. Pemberton Logistics had been fined millions and was under federal investigation. Dr. Whitmore had lost his license permanently. Sienna had left Marcus within weeks of the scandal, apparently deciding that a disgraced, unemployed fraud wasn't the meal ticket she'd signed up for. 3 other families had come forward with similar stories about Pemberton Logistics guardianship schemes. Patricia was representing all of them in a class action lawsuit. Claire and the kids were coming for Sunday dinner tomorrow. My grandchildren had sent me cards saying how proud they were of their warrior grandma, who'd stood up to the bad guys. My phone rang. Patricia. Dorothy, I have news. Marcus signed the final documents transferring his inheritance. You asked me to set up a trust for Lily and Thomas? Yes. They shouldn't be punished for their father's crimes. It's done. When you pass, many years from now, I hope, your house and estate will go directly to your grandchildren. Marcus gets nothing. I thought about how that would feel to Marcus, knowing he'd destroyed his inheritance along with his family. Some small part of me felt sad for him. But most of me felt satisfied that justice had been served. Thank you, Patricia. For everything. Thank you, Dorothy. You turned a personal betrayal into a case that's protecting dozens of other families. You should be proud. After we hung up, I went inside to start preparing for tomorrow's dinner. My kitchen, my home, my life, all still mine. All protected. All secure. Marcus had left me at the airport like forgotten luggage, thinking I was weak and helpless. Instead, I'd left him out of everything that mattered, my trust, my home, my life, and ultimately, my inheritance. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim.